Welcome to Parenting Unfiltered, a parents lead podcast. We bring expert guidance and simple, real-life tools to help you support your child's behavior health. I'm your host, Sara Kapp, and today we're joined by Dr. Collier, therapist, educator, person in long-term recovery, and author of the NeuroWhereabouts guide and the children's series, Know Your Neuro. Her Know Your Neuro prevention model earned a national commendation, and her work has been recognized with honors, including Counselor of the Year and the Torchbearer Award. In a 4-year study, she found that when kids learn how the brain grows and how to protect it, they make safer choices. We'll talk about brain-based prevention that families and schools can use every day to build protective factors that actually last. Dr. Collier, can you tell us a little bit about what got you interested in neuroscience and what led you down the path that you've taken?
Oh, great question. I always like to share a little bit about my own personal story because I was a kiddo who engaged in some risky behavior. My parents got divorced when I was around 11, 12 years old, just coming into puberty. And then we moved to this big, huge new city. And my mom takes me to go register for school and it says summer school. And I was like, oh, I'll take summer school. I'll get to know all kinds of new friends. And so I took summer school and I met a lot of great friends who were engaging in a lot of risky behavior. And so that was when my first drink was. First drug use was at about age 14, first intravenous substance use at 16, and then I had an overdose at 18. And by the grace of God, survived it. And when I graduated from rehab at 18 years old, I went back into school and started studying everything I could get my hands on about risky behavior. Because, Sara, I was a straight A student. I was anxious, rule-following kid that made a lot of bad decisions. So I was really baffled. And it was a cool time to go to school because all these brain studies were being published. So I was getting to read it as it was coming out because of the new functional MRI technology. And then I just started putting together presentations and eventually wrote my book, The NeuroWhereabouts Guide.
That's great. So your kind of personal experience, do you think that shaped, is that what you wanted to do? Were you interested in that as a child, or was your own personal experience kind of what paved your way?
Oh, it was the own personal experience. I knew how scared I was, how susceptible I was to peer influence, how badly I just wanted to fit in. And so I really wanted to work with kids and teens. And so through my school, I became a therapist and worked in psych hospitals on the adolescent units. My entire career has been working with kids and teens. And so just to help kids navigate the waters of today when there's so many more high-risk behaviors. And that's what I started noticing too. I've been a therapist this is my 26th year. The first half of my career, my average age client was around 16, 17, and it was all about drugs or alcohol prevention or treatment. Now, my average age client is around 10, 11, 12, and it is technology addiction, or they have seen pornography, or a nude was shared, or they've shared nudes and they're in trouble with the law. And they've dabbled in a few other risky behaviors. So I can see the amount of behaviors is increasing, but also the age of onset is decreasing.
So getting younger and younger. And so what do you think are I know you talked a little bit about technology and those risky behaviors, but what do you think is the biggest concern that we as parents want to be able to protect our kids from? We build in those protective factors that we talked about and of trying to build the best life that they can. But what are those little things that we can do as parents to kind of protect our kids from those risky behaviors?
So it's such a good question. And there's so many more to think about. But the first one is screens, is delaying any screen until after the age of 2, and then using only quality screen time for less than an hour a day, if that, right? Making sure that recreational screen time is relegated to the weekends. Kids need a lot of face-to-face, eye contact, really good co-regulation, attunement to develop secure attachment, which is the first level of scaffolding in a child's brain that has to happen before they can learn how to self-regulate on their own. But they need a lot of motor skills, a lot of activity, a lot of fine motor movement with toys. And so really understanding how a brain develops over time is why I named my book the NeuroWhereabouts Guide. So I made up a word and I actually got it put into the Urban Dictionary, NeuroWhereabouts. The idea is to know where your child's brain is in its developmental stages, what it can do and what it can't do. And then how much control do you have as a parent to grow skills and protect a kid's brain?
So I think a common theme that we hear over and over again, especially as I speak to experts like yourself, is that connection too, is the parental connection to a child is worth more than a lot of the other things out there, especially like instead of throwing a tablet in your child's face, like just spend time with them and connect with them. And how can that really affect as they grow, especially at that early age?
Oh, definitely. And this may sound harsh to hear, but I will be really happy when there is a day that giving children screens young is considered child abuse or child neglect, because we have a whole generation of kids who've had unfettered access to screens really early on. And we're seeing that they have higher substance use, higher mental health issues, and in many cases, lack of motor skills, lack of balance because their vestibular system's not developing. And so that first layer of scaffolding, when we think about secure attachment, everything else builds on that. So if we don't have a whole lot of eye contact face to face and we hit those physical developmental milestones, the social and emotional developmental milestones are going to be delayed.
So when you talked about the protective factors, what else does that consider for parents? I mean, we talk about the big ones, again, removing those screens and stuff, but what else can parents do to be protective or build those protective factors within their home to help so they don't have those behavioral concerns as they get older?
Sure. One of the most powerful tools that families can institute, which I think is potentially the easiest one, is mealtime. So the rule should be we eat together as many times as possible, if we can. And if, kids start to get busy, and so the tradition or ritual can be, we go to Chick-fil-A right on the way to soccer, but we sit and eat together in the car. So there's a great website called the Family Dinner Project. You can type in your kid's age and it'll generate questions for you to ask them. But also asking kids about, what was your worst thing that happened today? What was the funniest thing that happened today? What are the feelings that you're experiencing today? Good feelings, bad feelings, negative feelings. And that really leads me to the second biggest protective factor is teaching kids emotional literacy. So that means being able to identify what feeling you're having and then learning how to cope with it. Because if kids develop a whole toolbox of healthy coping mechanisms, they're not going to distract it with a screen away. They're not going to smoke it away, right? They're going to go to their parents and talk about what's going on. I always tell people there are 7 primary human emotions. And out of those 7, 5 are negative to feel. Unless you hate surprise, then 6 are negative to feel. And feelings are not facts. They're just information that tell your body what you need or what you want. So teaching kids how to have emotional literacy is really a simple 3-step process. What feeling are you having? What does this feeling tell your body that you need or that you want? And then what can we do to help you make that happen? Literally. So my children's book series, Know Your Neuro, Adventures of a Growing Brain, book 3 is all about those 3 steps and helping kids learn that.
So you talked too about the conversations of just opening up those conversations. Through Parents Lead, we actually also have the conversation starters because we also agree that the conversation and having those conversations over time really build up. So how do you say, or what would you say that small conversations add up over time, or would you rather just one big conversation as they get to be a teenager? What really makes the biggest impact?
I'm so glad that you asked that, because we know that prevention works if it is done consistently and repeated over each developmental milestone. So if you think about a child's brain development, it changes about every 3 months. Like there are new pathways created about every 3 months. That's your frequency indicator. That's how many times you need to have that conversation, is about every 3 months. So in the NeuroWhereabouts guide, I put lots of conversation starters for each high-risk behavior, because a lot of people think, oh, well, they already heard that. And so they don't repeat it. But it has to be repeated because a child's brain development will hear it, feel it, and think about it differently every few months as they grow. And so if we have the same theme conversation, protect your brain, grow your skills, but then we change the topic. So, okay, today we're talking about screen addiction. Next week, we're going to talk about marijuana. The week after that, we'll talk about pornography. And we just keep going. Of course, developmentally appropriate for each age. Then we get a cumulative effect, and they have a message that is embedded in their own thought process that says, protect your brain, grow your skills, from all of those things.
So you really take the same message, but just really tailor it to their age and where you're at developmentally.
Yes. My children's book series has 2 age groups. So K through 2. And we don't talk about risky behavior during that series, right? We just talk about, here's what your brain is, teaching them about basic brain development and setting it up so that their brain is a superhero, neuro, who goes on adventures to learn skills. The grades 3 through 5 series has the same themes and titles, but this is when we start to introduce 7 different high-risk behaviors that kids are exposed to by the time they are in 3rd grade. So 7, 8 years old, kids already know about things like vaping, bad pictures online. They see people drinking alcohol. They can glean from what's happening in the world or what they see on TV. We want to empower parents to have those conversations earlier. But I find that parents are like, you want me to talk about suicide in elementary school? What would I say? And so that's why I've done a lot of research on, okay, how do you explain something as scary and complicated as suicide to a kiddo who's in the 4th grade? It's so much more important that you as a parent empower your child with that information, because what will happen is some kid at school is going to talk about that, or they'll see it on TV and it will scare them and they won't know what to ask about.
Yeah, it's better coming from you, a trusted adult.
Yes.
As important that is versus another 7 or 8-year-old who doesn't really know exactly what they're saying. Yes. So can you share a quick story of how building a protective factor in connection or resilience has changed a child's choice over time?
Oh, sure. Well, I could give some examples from my own practice, but I'm thinking about a parent and a child in particular. It was a kiddo and his dad. So they came to me because this young man was just starting to hit puberty, and things were happening in his body that he didn't really know how to handle. And he went over to a kid's house when COVID was lifting. And he was so excited because he wanted to have friends and sleepovers and interactions, which are so developmentally appropriate and important. But this kiddo at that house said, hey, we should try these things. And he showed him some pornography seeds. And this poor child was just aghast and disgusted and fearful. He didn't know what to do. So he came home and talked to his dad, and his dad didn't know what to do. So they both came in, and we were able to have this really open conversation. And the dad was able to grow some skills about, okay, how do I talk to my kids about these bad pictures that I'm seeing online? And we practiced refusal skills. So when that happens to him again, when another kid says, look at this, he'll know what to say. And him and his dad practiced that. So I saw him a few years after that when he was much older and much taller. And his dad said to me that they grew so close from that interaction that his child kept coming to him with all kinds of other discussions when he saw risky behavior out there in the world. So I think that's a really good example of connection and how it builds resiliency, healthy, secure attachment, And that child was able to grow refusal skills in a way that he may not have if his dad didn't really know what to say or how to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think parents are too also learning how to navigate. As you say, they're getting younger and younger. I have a 7 and 9-year-old. So when they come to me with some of my questions, I was like, what? How do you even know about this? So it's me learning as well alongside of them. And so just like you said, they figured it out together.
Yes.
And now they have that trusted relationship that he knows he can go to his dad.
Yeah.
And so having those conversations and having that. So that is a great point of those trusted relationships. So what does protective connection look like on a normal Tuesday afternoon?
Oh my gosh. So that is some sort of connection in the morning. There should always be a ritual of connection. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn out breakfast meal, right? But it could be some sort of a connection where a parent gets to express love, gets to create an opening for kids to have a great day, but also no cell phone contact during the day. And so I've got a lot of parents who text their kids during school hours, which really interferes with their learning. As soon as a child gets distracted on like a watch or a phone, they lose about 9 minutes of learning. So for a child's parent to say, okay, phone's off during school day, I'll pick you up here, we'll turn it back on so I know. And then some sort of another ritual of connection that can be any time during that day, hopefully some sort of a family meal, but also chores. So it's really important to remember that one of the best ways to increase a child's self-esteem is through building self-efficacy, which is that feeling that you have an effect on the world, right? And that is achieved through chores. And so the mantra should be, if your child can, they should. So as soon as they can wash dishes, they should. As soon as they can do their own laundry, they should. We should be starting to create a child that becomes very self-supporting in little small behaviors at a time. So chores after school, a very structured place to do homework that is distraction-free. Kids are taking about 3 hours longer to do homework today because they're so distracted. And so making sure that there's a set amount of time. And then there should also be a time when screens go off. And that should be family time when screens go in a basket, eating together, interacting as a family. Even if you as a family watch TV together, that's a much more passive activity in the brain. And then a really good bedtime. And with littles, that means reading the same book to them over and over and over and over. It is one of the healthiest things for you we can do for children's brain development is that shoulder to shoulder reading over and over again when we're about ready to go to bed. So that would be my perfect Tuesday.
It kind of ends the day too with that connection, that one-on-one connection too, versus the screen time too.
Exactly.
So that's great.
Yes.
You talked a little bit too through that about the importance of routine. The importance of routine and making sure that you're staying consistent within the home. Does that really help with the brain development too, especially with our young kiddos?
Yes. And it goes back to safety. Because when a child has structure and routine, they don't have to think about things that are scary or out of their control or what's next. But when there is a lot of instability or there's no routine, a child doesn't know what's coming next, it triggers a fear response in the amygdala. If you think about your limbic system and the little amygdalae that are searching the environment for things that might be a threat, the things you don't know, your brain interprets as a potential threat. So we can maybe stay on a little bit of an alert when we don't know what's coming. So that is why kids need structure daily as much as we can get it. And I know this is the most difficult for single parents. And this is why chores are important, because you don't have to do it all on your own if you're a single parent. They can be a part of running that household with you, but having as much of a structure as you can. It also gets, I think, more difficult as kids get more activities as they grow, because then there's a sliver of time left at the day. And so working in problem solving and decision making with kids as they grow and develop to figure out what a new schedule looks like is the best way to empower kids to adopt that schedule themselves.
I really like how you said too, that involve your kids in some of those things too. Parents get so overwhelmed, like you said, especially as they get activities, you're trying to keep up with sports schedules and schools and jobs and all of the things that go on. So what is one way or your go-to mindset shift that you can kind of help parents replace that fear with confidence as they help their children grow?
So it's a good question. I was thinking about that as I was writing the book. Because I wrote the elementary, middle, high school chapter, and I wanted to graph each high-risk behavior when it spiked, because I want parents to be able to have the conversation before the spike, because most of the time it happens after. And so there's this moment in time, I think, when a parent knows they should probably talk about something with their child, but they don't because they're scared. And so what I want to do is try to normalize that fear. Every parent has that fear. Maybe not every parent, but some parents are like, yeah, I'm talking about that. And here's what I'm going to say. But I think most parents don't know what they want to say. That's why I wrote scripts. Literally, you take my script and use your own hip, slick, and cool language. But in the chapter that it says, okay, this is about to spike. Here's what you should say. And here's the neuroscience that backs up this really simple script. And then I always recommend creating what I call a family code. And so I do family code workshops all over the United States where we bring in babysitters and free food, and we have families come in with kids as young as 7. And this is also an activity that you can find for free on the website, knowyourneuro.org. But we have families come in, and they go through a 3-step process where they write their family values, and they get to choose, the kids get to choose which values along with the family. Then you write down the no's. Here are the behaviors. There's a whole list of all kinds of no behaviors that we're not going to engage in. And then we put those together. So this is our why. This is who we are as a family, what we do, what we don't do, and why. And then that goes on the wall. And then during those family dinner meals, then you can say, hey, did you guys know it's National Smoke Out Day? They're going to be like, what are you talking about? Right? You say, well, everybody on this day tries to quit smoking. Do you guys know anybody who uses cigarettes or vaping? Now, if your child says no, check. Same conversation next year on National Smoke Out Day. But if your child says, oh yeah, so-and-so vapes, tell me more. What have you heard? Well, you can see our family code. We don't do that. It hurts brain development. Prevention conversation done. Then, if you have 6 of those per year, you're going to cover each developmental change that kiddo makes. And then you can just use a prevention holiday. Hey, did you guys know it's National Eating Disorders Week? Your kids are going to be like, what are you talking about, Dad? Right? But it's just a segue to bring it up because I want parents to feel empowered. I know how to talk about that. And I know exactly what to say because our code is right there. And then the conversation is not a lecture. It's not about fear. It's about this is who we are as a family and how we protect our brain.
Yeah, and really setting those family values as well, versus not making it a lecture after it's happened, but really talk about that prevention and saying, this is why, this is the harm that it can do or what that might look like. So, and as we talk about some of those risky behaviors, we really also as parents want to protect our kids. And so how do we set those firm boundaries and limits that are healthy for both the child as they're learning how to navigate the complexity of childhood, but also making sure that they're safe?
So I think knowing a child's NeuroWhereabouts, so knowing where their brain is, what's developing, what they can do and what they can't do, and using brain-based parenting techniques, which just simply mean that you know what the executive functioning skills are. And there's not a whole lot, so it's easy to memorize them. And then being able to praise kids for using those skills, especially when it comes to high-risk behavior. So being able to say, wow, you solved a problem. That was amazing. How did you do that? Oh, I like your judgment. Oh, that's good empathy. Increasing those skills and then asking them, how would you use this if somebody came to you and said, hey, try this or do this? So once we've established those conversations, we do a brain-based praise, then we can explain to kids, look, I'm going to be your frontal lobe until you grow one of your own. And so at 12 years old, you've got about 10 to 15% of your frontal lobe. So I'm going to be the rest. By the time you're 16, you've got about 45%. So I will be the rest. So I will definitely offer you opportunities to earn more trust and more freedom with our family code that is in action and play at all times. And so to be able to say, I know you're going to make a mistake. Oh my gosh, you only have 20% of your frontal lobe online right now, which means you'll only have 20% of the impulse control that you'll have in, let's say, 10, 15 years. So of course, you're going to be able to make mistakes. What I hope that you do is follow our family code. And if you choose not to, there'll be a consequence. But if you come to me and say, okay, this is what I did, and you're honest, your consequence will be so much less. But if I find out from anybody else besides you, right, your coach, your teacher, a police officer, your consequence will double or triple. So come to me.
And have those, again, open, honest conversations.
Yes.
One thing we also talk about a lot too is role modeling. As parents, our kids are always watching us as the number one influence in their lives. So how would you say parents can really just be mindful too of their own actions, whether it's screen time or whether it's how they emotionally regulate themselves? And what can you say about that?
Sure. So the first one, phone. It's so critical. I challenge parents to, if they're on their phone and a child walks in the room, to literally look up and say, oh, hey, put the phone down and make a noise. Because what you're saying to that child is you are the most important person in this room. And the more that you do that, the more they will do that. And then you can say, yeah, I modeled this for you because that's how I want you to act when you're around anybody. There will be no phubbing. You're not going to snub anybody with a phone, right? And so that's the first thing to do. But I also think that there are a lot of parents out there who already have addictions or engaged in risky behavior. If you smoke, smoke outside. Don't smoke inside where your kids are, and allow your kids to ask you to stop smoking as much as they want, right? If you drink, really model what would be the most responsible drinking formula. I actually have that formula in my book. I've had kids tear it out of the book or take a picture and give it to their parents because they see parents drinking every day in an irresponsible way, and it disturbs them, and they know that it's a risky behavior. And so being able to say, I'm going to demonstrate responsible drinking use in front of you, to model that. But I think also using brain-based praise. So asking kids to demonstrate good impulse control, rewarding them for problem solving, selective attention, making sure that they're building those skills along the way as well is important.
So alongside parents, I know you do a lot of work with schools as well. So can you tell me a little bit about your involvement and how you can really shape the emotional building that professionals within the schools who spend 40 hours a week with our kids.
Yes.
How you can really empower them to help build that emotional resilience with kids.
This is my passion project. So I got to develop a prevention program back in between 2008 and 2013 at a local high school in Houston. I spent 4 years there. What we did is we saturated the school with information about 15 high-risk behaviors and how they affected the brain. So we got to do a certain amount of classes in advisory or homeroom every year. I think we had about 12. And then that were just dedicated to learning about prevention, the neurodevelopmental effects of it. Then we had parent events, we had teacher training. So we were able to bolster and empower the administration to write good policy, to set good, it was a high school, so we set good drug testing policies with them, we really supported that school. And then we replicated it in different schools after that, but we found that the private schools were the only ones that could really afford it. So once my book was published, I started out creating videos and I put it into knowyourneuro.org. I wanted it to be a free prevention program so that any school could just plug and play. So on Know Your Neuro, there are videos for kindergartners all the way up through 12th grade with a one-page handout that schools can use in advisory, in homerooms, English classes, health classes, wherever they can fit in that curricula. Then there's an entire family page and a schools page. So on the schools page, the activities are divided into tiers. So the language that schools really know and how to plug that in. Then the family page is divided in different parenting techniques, behavior modification, prevention, treatment, all of that. So the counselors can use that page when they're working with families or doing family groups before or after school, or when the counselors are seeing kids in their office, they can use that information there. And I received a grant this year to help me create an app that will push out those 6 conversations to families every year right there on their phone with a script to make it even easier. And so we're doing a lot of data collection from schools to help them figure out what data do they want to show that this program is efficacious. And then how can we give them the collection means that is free to use? Because we really want this to be free and used consistently. What I've found is that schools will spend 10, 20, hundreds of $1,000s on prevention programming, only for it to become outdated, or half the teachers that got trained in it, or counselors, they're gone in 4 years, right? So I wanted to create something that would stand the test of time and be all about neurodevelopment. So I'm constantly putting new videos about the new research that's coming out about marijuana, for instance, and nicotine, the little pouches, all kinds of things that are coming out. We want to stay up to date and have that available for schools anytime.
And I think too, when schools really talk about prevention, they might not really understand exactly what prevention is. They think about all these national events that they put on, and which may have some accurate information, but it's really developing, like we talked about in those early years, and having those conversations every single year, depending on the age, and really talk about how we can prevent things and put the tools in place by the connection piece, the conversations and all of those different supports and protective factors that we talked about.
Most definitely. I have watched schools struggle with how to do it consistently over time. But the schools that have used Know Your Neuro find it really easy to plug and play, and also to train new teachers that come in. And I can also support the schools in person or via Zoom, like a 1-hour webinar with schools to help them learn what does good, consistent programming look like, and how can you use this program in your morning announcements, in your family emails. All of those are pre-programmed and ready to go. So even like a principal could sit down and say, okay, here's the prevention day. I'm going to send this out to families. I'm going to send this out to schools, and make sure our teachers are ready to do a 10-minute video on this. Doing that consistently over time gets a really good positive impact and decrease behaviors, toxic, not just, I said toxic, decrease high-risk behaviors, but also increase executive functioning skills, because that's what we see as a deficit happening because of lack of parenting, more screen time, all the variety of high-risk behaviors that are out there, the advertising and marketing that addiction for profit industries can freely engage in with no regulation. Our prevention programming has to match or beat that.
If you could give an educator one simple advice that they could do and implement today, what would that be to help prevent those behaviors?
Plan at least 4 to 6 prevention activities per year that include all of the students. That's not easy today. Some schools don't even have a gym that can handle all those students. And it doesn't have to be a huge, wild assembly. It can just be 4 to 6 Know Your Neuro videos with a 1-page activity handout that they do consistently throughout the year. If a lot of schools think about Red Ribbon Week, and that may be the only prevention that they do, but then it gets kind of wild and the topic gets muddled into all the fun activities that you might do of the week. But it's not about just not doing drugs. It's about protecting executive functioning skills from the variety of high-risk behavior. And so that would be the one thing that I would encourage administrators to do is just plan 4 to 6 simple prevention activities per year.
Is there things that they can do on the daily that it could help engage those children, really build that relationship, I think? What would that look like for?
So that would look like a morning announcement that includes a secure attachment message. Because when we think about a student's affinity to a school, how much they love and like their school is a protective factor, but it's also predictive. Kids who feel attached to their teachers, administrators, principals, they engage in less risky behavior. So if a principal can actively say, we love you guys, we care about you. I remember one day I went to the school that was next door to an agency I was working in, and the principal was meeting kids as they were getting out of their cars and hugging them in the morning and saying, have a great day. We love you guys. We support you. Hi, Mrs. Robinson. It's, I think, harder to do with bigger schools. But if that person is out there every morning opening doors, it sets a tone for the entire secure attachment of that organization to that student.
Yeah, that's a great point. Every morning when I drop my kids off at school, the principal's in the parking lot waving, saying hi to the kids. And you can see that the joy that it brings to them. And I just feel, as a parent, sending my kid to school a little bit safer and knowing that they have that connection and that.
Exactly. And, why does that drop off in high school? Why I want high school principals to do that too. I don't see that as much, but yes.
Yeah. Usually then the high schooler is a lot bigger. So
yes.
If you could leave caregivers with one simple advice of maybe the power of connection or prevention, what would that be?
The advice would be to learn what it means to be an authoritative parent. And this is a parent who balances love and limits. And a lot of times I see couples where one parent is more authoritarian. They're much more reliant on the rules, maybe even a little bit less affectionate. And then the other parent may try to balance that out with being more permissive, maybe more warmth and love rather than, focus on rules. I always say, if those two parents can negotiate, they make the perfect authoritative parent, which balances the love and limits. To be able to understand how you can practice authoritative parenting every day, to be able to focus on giving a lot of warmth and love and safe space, but to also be firm about the rules. And I think it's easier to do that when you use brain-based parenting, because then you have the neuroscience on your side. And you can say, this rule is a bummer. I hate that you don't have a cell phone 24 hours a day like you would want it, but I am protecting your brain. I have to be your frontal lobe until when you grow one of your own. A parent said to me, what do I say when my kid says, but everybody has a cell phone? I say that they tell their child, I'm so sorry that those parents don't care enough about their brain development like I care about yours. The idea is that you don't have to give your child everything. As a matter of fact, that has really negative consequences later on. Like kids who grow up with permissive parenting, they have really poor tenacity and resilience, and they have more entitlement, higher divorce rate. So kids who grow up with a really good balanced parenting style, even if it's that two parents that are working on that together, they have higher self-worth and higher self-value. They actually use less drugs later on in life. They have better homeostasis, the ability to balance their life out. And that really is just by learning what an authoritative parent means and how to do that every day after school.
I think of being that authoritative parent still allows you to show emotion and love and all those things that every child needs.
So much so. One of the healthiest things that you can do with your kids is show emotions around them, cry when you're upset, or even be mad when you're upset, but to be able to resolve those things. When kids see the argument between mom and dad and they don't get to see the resolution, it leaves them with that feeling of fear because I don't know what happened or how it got concluded. But when they can see their parents make up, apologize, own, and be accountable for their mistakes, going to your kid and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't know about this information. I'm going to have to go backwards or dial this back, or I said something that hurt you, or I yelled. These are really beautiful modeling techniques that not only hold yourself accountable, but hold your child accountable, are the epitome of authoritative parenting.
That's all great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Collier. I appreciate everything you've shared with us, and thank you.
Oh, it's been such an honor. Thank you.